Before he became Eminem, the man who revolutionized rap, Marshall Mathers was just a boy growing up in the chaos of Detroit, with a mother who fought tooth and nail to give him a chance. From a young age, Debbie Nelson encouraged Marshall's creativity. Living in Detroit, their home was filled with music, from Motown hits to the rock anthems of the 70s. Debbie recalls how little Marshall would mimic her singing in the mirror, grabbing anything that resembled a microphone. She described his talent for storytelling even as a child, turning mundane moments into dramatic performances. By the time he could write, Marshall was filling notebooks with rhymes and superhero sketches, blending his love for comic books with an emerging lyrical skill. Debbie was his earliest audience, clapping and encouraging him as he performed. Between the ages of 11 and 13, Marshall even found entrepreneurial ways to entertain others. He would breakdance at school, charging kids 25 cents to watch him spin and flip. This hustle hinted at the drive that would later define his rap career. Debbie fueled this passion by reminding him constantly that he could achieve anything if he worked hard enough. Their bond was forged under the harsh realities of Detroit life. Debbie, a single mother, juggled several jobs, from waitressing to driving an ice cream truck, to ensure Marshall never felt neglected. They moved frequently, often due to financial instability or unlivable conditions in their apartments. One of their longest stints was in a trailer park outside Detroit, but despite the reputation such places carry, Debbie worked tirelessly to make their home clean, safe, and welcoming. Detroit in the 1980s was a tough place to grow up, especially for a boy like Marshall. He was small, shy, and often the target of bullying. Debbie's unwavering love served as his shield. She fiercely protected her son, stepping in to confront school officials and other parents whenever Marshall faced unfair treatment. Their survival in such an environment laid the groundwork for the stories that would eventually dominate his music. Debbie would frequently take Marshall on walks through the streets of Detroit, pointing out murals and graffiti, which he found inspiring. Together, they would talk about dreams of leaving their circumstances behind, a shared fantasy of a better life fueled by music and creativity. Debbie's role in Marshall's early career was instrumental. She entered him into talent contests, local performances, and even paid for his first microphone from her meager earnings. She was there when he first performed under the name Eminem, a playful nod to his initials, and when he transitioned to Eminem. Despite being laughed off stage in his early performances, Marshall's persistence didn't waver. Debbie kept encouraging him, telling him that the greats weren't born successful, they had to fight for it. When Marshall would come home after a bad day, she reminded him to write about his feelings, a habit that later became the foundation of his brutally honest lyrics. One of their shared pastimes was creating alternate versions of nursery rhymes and hymns. Marshall loved the rhythm of songs like The Old Rugged Cross, and Debbie would make silly variations to make him laugh. She believed in teaching him the power of words and rhythm long before it became his profession. While their bond was undeniably strong, it wasn't without challenges. Debbie, who carried the weight of single motherhood after a string of failed relationships, sometimes leaned on Marshall emotionally more than a parent should. He became her confidant and support system as much as she was his. Marshall's absent father, Bruce Mathers, left a void in his life that added tension to their dynamic. Bruce's failure to respond to Marshall's letters or show interest in his life created a deep wound that Debbie struggled to heal. She overcompensated, giving Marshall everything he wanted, sometimes to a fault. From extravagant superhero costumes to the toys he collected, she ensured he never felt deprived, even if it meant going without herself. However, this overcompensation sometimes clashed with the reality of their financial struggles. Arguments about their living conditions or Debbie's attempts at new relationships often boiled over, creating a tense environment. Marshall, protective of his mother, but also frustrated by their circumstances, began channeling those feelings into his writing. The struggles of Marshall's early life became a recurring theme in his music. His lyrics often painted a grim picture of poverty, instability, and the emotional complexities of his upbringing. Debbie's influence can be seen in songs that delve into his relationship with her, whether it's in expressions of love, frustration, or outright anger. Marshall's vivid storytelling, honed in their chaotic household, became his signature. He turned the experiences of moving from house to house, the pain of bullying, and the weight of watching his mother work tirelessly into raw emotional art. Albums like the Slim Shady LP and Marshall Mathers LP drew directly from these experiences, giving fans an unfiltered glimpse into his turbulent childhood. Interestingly, Debbie recalls moments when Marshall would create raps that defended her. Long before the infamous fallout that fueled tracks like Cleanin' Out My Closet, he saw his mother as his rock and protector. It's a reminder of the complex duality in their relationship, one that was built on both love and the tension of shared hardship. The beginnings of Eminem's story are rooted in survival, creativity, and the bond between a mother and her son. It's a tale of ambition born from adversity, where every struggle became fuel for one of the greatest music careers of all time. Artistic creation or reality, analyzing the allegations against Debbie. Eminem's lyrics often blurred the line between artistic expression and reality, and no one felt this more than his mother, Debbie Nelson. When The Eminem Show dropped in 2002, the track Cleanin' Out My Closet became an instant cultural lightning rod. The song accused Debbie of being an abusive, manipulative, and toxic mother. Eminem's vivid descriptions, claiming she suffered from Munchausen syndrome by proxy and portrayed her as neglectful, shocked fans and painted Debbie as the ultimate villain in Marshall's life. But was it all true? Debbie claimed she barely recognized herself in the lyrics. In her book, she described hearing the song for the first time as a moment of heartbreak, realizing her son had turned their private struggles into public entertainment. Debbie argued that these accusations were either exaggerated or outright false, but the damage was done. To the public, she was now infamous as Slim Shady's unhinged mom. While Eminem presented a one-sided view of their relationship, Debbie argued that his songs painted an unfair picture of her parenting. She pointed out that Marshall's childhood had its struggles, but it was far from the dystopia his lyrics described. Debbie stated that she was never the pill-popping welfare mom he described, but rather a hardworking single parent who did her best to protect Marshall from the chaos of Detroit. She also pushed back against accusations of abuse, claiming her strictness was born out of fear for her son's safety in dangerous neighborhoods. However, some accounts align with Marshall's perspective. For instance, their frequent moves and Debbie's reliance on various men created instability in Marshall's life. It was this instability, coupled with Debbie's tendency to lean on her son emotionally, that Eminem later channeled into his music. Eminem's lyrics didn't just stay within the realm of music, they spilled into public perception. Debbie became a household name, often caricatured in tabloids as the crazy mom behind the rap superstar. From late-night comedians to magazine headlines, her life was under a microscope. This scrutiny wasn't just embarrassing, it was isolating. Debbie recounted being harassed by fans in public, spat at in grocery stores, and subjected to ridicule from strangers who believed they knew her through Eminem's lyrics. Scrutiny wasn't just embarrassing, it was isolating. Debbie recounted being harassed by fans in public, spat at in grocery stores, and subjected to ridicule from strangers who believed they knew her through Eminem's lyrics. It wasn't just fans. Their parents often sneered at her too, assuming she had failed as a mother. The media's sensationalization only added fuel to the fire. Tabloids regularly ran stories questioning her sanity, her motives, and even her right to a relationship with her son. Interviews where Debbie tried to defend herself were often edited to emphasize her emotional outbursts, casting her as erratic or bitter rather than misunderstood. Debbie didn't take the accusations lying down. In 2000, she filed a $10 million defamation lawsuit against Marshall, alleging that his lyrics were not just exaggerated, but damaging to her reputation and mental health. The lawsuit became a media circus, with many seeing it as a desperate attempt to cash in on her son's success. Eventually, the case was settled for a symbolic $25, a verdict that cemented public opinion against her. In interviews, Debbie repeatedly claimed that she was misrepresented both in Eminem's music and in the media. She described herself as a caring mother who had made sacrifices to raise her son. According to her, the narrative of her being abusive or neglectful was a convenient story to sell albums and create controversy. However, the lawsuits and public rebuttals often backfired, reinforcing the perception of a bitter mother trying to ride her son's coattails. Debbie and some critics have speculated about Eminem's motivations for vilifying her. Some believe it was a calculated career move. By positioning himself as the product of a broken home, Eminem tapped into a universal theme of hardship and resilience that resonated deeply with fans. The image of a dysfunctional family added authenticity to his persona as an outsider and underdog. Others argue that Marshall's lyrics reflect unresolved trauma. Debbie's reliance on Marshall for emotional support during his childhood may have caused him to see her as both a caregiver and a source of stress. Songs like "Cleanin' Out My Closet" could be viewed as therapeutic outlets, allowing him to process feelings of anger and abandonment. Interestingly, some of Marshall's earlier work shows a more affectionate side of their relationship. Tracks like "Mockingbird" hint at his understanding of Debbie's struggles as a single mother. This duality in his music underscores the complicated dynamics of their relationship. Eminem's public persona as Slim Shady thrived on controversy, and his tumultuous relationship with Debbie became part of his brand. Some industry insiders believe the depiction of his mother wasn't entirely personal, but a deliberate artistic choice. By airing family grievances in such a raw and unapologetic way, Eminem stood out in a genre where authenticity is king. However, the emotional intensity of tracks like "Cleanin' Out My Closet" suggests there was more to the story than marketing. Debbie's actions, whether misunderstood or genuinely harmful, left a deep impression on Marshall, fueling his art with a mix of pain, frustration, and catharsis. Debbie's role in Eminem's lyrics remains one of the most talked about aspects of his career. While his fans saw her as a villain, others sympathized with her plight, questioning whether Marshall's fame gave him the right to expose their private life so brutally. Regardless of the truth, this public feud left lasting scars on their family. Art or reality? For Debbie Nelson, the lines blurred in the harshest way possible, leaving her as both a mother and a muse in one of hip-hop's most compelling sagas. The cost of fame is loneliness. Debbie's life in Eminem's shadow. Marshall Mathers gained global fame, but for his mother Debbie, living in his shadow meant losing her identity and her peace. In the early days of Eminem's rise, Debbie Nelson was filled with pride. She had encouraged Marshall to pursue his dreams and supported him in his relentless quest to break into the music industry. When his second album, the Slim Shady LP, skyrocketed him to stardom in 1999, Debbie marveled at her son's accomplishments. She saw him go from the struggling Eminem to the global phenomenon Eminem. But as Marshall's fame grew, so did the fallout for Debbie. Fans who worshipped Eminem began targeting her, taking his lyrics literally and holding her accountable for his depictions of their troubled past. Verbal abuse from strangers became a regular occurrence. Shoppers at grocery stores would spit at her or yell slurs. On one occasion, she found chewing gum stuck in her hair after being harassed in public. For Debbie, the pride she once felt for her son's success turned into a source of despair. She became infamous not for who she was, but for how Marshall portrayed her. Debbie's life became a fishbowl as Marshall's fame grew. The media didn't just scrutinize her role in his upbringing, they dissected every aspect of her personal life. Tabloid headlines labeled her a villain, a bad mother, and a greedy opportunist. Her attempts to defend herself only seemed to stoke the fire. Every interview or public statement was spun into a narrative that painted her as unstable or out of touch. Living under such intense public scrutiny made everyday life nearly impossible. Debbie described how the constant intrusion forced her into isolation. She stopped going to public places, avoided social gatherings, and limited her interactions with people who might have preconceived notions about her. Even within her own family, she struggled to shake the stigma of being Eminem's mom. As the ridicule and accusations mounted, Debbie's mental health began to deteriorate. In her memoir, she revealed that she suffered from anxiety and depression, worsened by the relentless public attacks. The isolation she experienced compounded her feelings of despair, leaving her with few outlets to express herself. The estrangement from Marshall only deepened her pain. For years, she had been his closest confidant, someone he turned to for advice and support. Losing that connection left a void that no amount of public defense could fill. Debbie described how the disconnect with her son felt like losing a part of herself, even as she struggled to reconcile the person he had become with the boy she had raised. The tension between Debbie and Marshall also affected her relationships with other family members. Perhaps most heartbreaking for Debbie was her inability to bond with her grandchildren. She described feeling shut out of their lives due to her strained relationship with Marshall. While she longed to be a part of their world, the distance between her and her son created an invisible wall that she could never quite break through. Her relationship with her younger son, Nate, was also complicated by the fallout. Though Nate maintained a closer relationship with Marshall, Debbie often felt caught in the middle. She struggled to balance her role as a mother to both sons while navigating the public narrative that made her seem irredeemable in Marshall's eyes. In the years following her fallout with Marshall, Debbie tried to rebuild her life. She attempted to establish her own identity outside of being Eminem's mom, though it proved difficult. Her memoir, My Son Marshall, My Son Eminem, was one such effort. In it, Debbie detailed her perspective, painting herself as a misunderstood mother who had been unjustly vilified. While the book offered a glimpse into her struggles, it also reignited public controversy, with fans and critics questioning her motives for publishing it. Debbie also sought to re-establish a sense of normalcy. She focused on personal healing, leaning on close family members for support. Despite her estrangement from Marshall, she held out hope for reconciliation, praying for her son and cherishing memories of the better times they shared. However, the scars left by the media and public opinion made moving forward a constant challenge. Despite the bitterness and alienation, Debbie always maintained that her love for Marshall never wavered. She often spoke about her prayers for him, her pride in his accomplishments, and her wish to see him find peace. Even in the face of public rejection, she clung to the belief that their relationship could one day be mended. For Debbie Nelson, life in the shadow of Eminem's fame has been a journey of pride, pain, and perseverance. It's a reminder that the cost of success is often borne not just by the star, but by the family left behind.
Media and law as the battlefield between mother and son.
When family disputes become public, the courtroom and headlines replace the kitchen table, and for Eminem and his mother, Debbie Nelson, the world was watching. In 2000, Debbie Nelson took a step that shocked many. She sued her son for $10 million, claiming defamation. The lawsuit centered on lyrics from Eminem's music that painted her as an abusive and manipulative mother. Tracks like My Name Is and Cleanin' Out, My Closet portrayed Debbie in a deeply unflattering light, accusing her of neglect, over-medicating him as a child, and even suffering from Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Debbie argued that Marshall's lyrics were not only exaggerated, but entirely false in some cases. She claimed that his portrayal of her as a pill-popping welfare mom was a carefully constructed narrative designed to sell records. The lawsuit, however, was widely criticized. Fans saw it as a cash grab, while critics accused Debbie of trying to capitalize on her son's success. The case was eventually settled out of court, with Debbie receiving a symbolic $25. For Debbie, this wasn't just a legal defeat, it was a public humiliation, cementing the image of her as opportunistic and estranged from her son. The lawsuit turned an already public feud into a media circus. Tabloids ran with the story, often framing Debbie as the villain. Headlines like Eminem's mom sues Slim Shady and Marshall's mom wants millions dominated newsstands, with little nuance about Debbie's side of the story. The media consistently amplified the most dramatic aspects of their conflict, portraying Debbie as unhinged and out for revenge. Interviews she gave to defend herself were often edited to emphasize her emotional outbursts or portray her as desperate. One infamous incident involved a tabloid publishing excerpts from Debbie's lawsuit alongside Eminem's lyrics, creating a stark and highly dramatized comparison. The media's role wasn't just limited to reporting, it actively shaped public perception. Debbie's attempts to tell her side of the story were often drowned out by the dominant narrative that she was the source of Marshall's pain, while Eminem was the misunderstood hero. The public's response to Debbie was polarizing. To Eminem's fans, she was the villain in his success story, the mother he had to overcome to achieve greatness. Her decision to sue only reinforced this image for many, who viewed it as proof of the greed and toxicity Marshall described in his lyrics. However, others began to question whether Debbie was being unfairly scapegoated. Critics noted that Eminem's depiction of his mother was undeniably one-sided and possibly exaggerated for artistic effect. Some wondered if Debbie's struggles as a single mother had been unfairly weaponized against her in the court of public opinion. Despite these occasional moments of sympathy, The prevailing narrative was clear. Debbie was seen as an opportunist trying to profit off her son's fame, a perception that haunted her for years. In 2008, Debbie published her memoir, My Son Marshall, My Son Eminem, Setting the Record Straight. The book was her attempt to reclaim her story and provide her perspective on their troubled relationship. In it, Debbie chronicled her struggles as a single mother, her sacrifices for Marshall, and her heartbreak over their estrangement. The memoir delved into the pain she felt hearing herself vilified in Eminem's lyrics and the loneliness that came with being alienated from her son. Debbie also offered details about Marshall's early years, emphasizing the closeness they once shared and the lengths she went to support his dreams. While the book gained attention, it also reignited controversy. Fans questioned her motives for publishing it, accusing her of trying to exploit the very relationship she claimed to want to repair. For Debbie, however, the book was a way to find closure and ensure her side of the story was heard. The feud between Eminem and Debbie raises larger questions about the cost of fame. Marshall's raw, confessional lyrics were a key part of his appeal, but they came at the expense of his family's privacy. Debbie became a central figure in his art, sometimes as a villain, sometimes as a cautionary tale, but the reality of their relationship was far more complicated. For Debbie, the public nature of their conflict meant she could never fully separate her identity from her son's success. Her attempts to defend herself often backfired, leaving her stuck in the role Eminem's lyrics had created for her. The tension between Marshall's need for artistic authenticity and Debbie's desire for a private, loving relationship created a moral gray area that neither could fully escape. Despite the years of conflict, Debbie always maintained that she loved her son and was proud of his accomplishments. She expressed hope for reconciliation, even as the weight of their public feud made it seem impossible. Marshall, for his part, has hinted in interviews and lyrics that he feels some regret about the way their relationship played out, though their bond remains fragile. Debbie Nelson's battle with her son wasn't just fought in courtrooms or on the airwaves. It was a fight for her identity, her dignity, and her place in the story of one of hip-hop's greatest artists.